Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. And I'm so happy that you are here with me this morning. It's so good to be back here with you. Last weekend was an incredible weekend, incredible journey of being able to face fears, and I really enjoyed that. And it's good to be back here though with you to have a morning of fellowship. So Shabbat Shalom. Let's go ahead and wait for just a couple minutes for some people to sign on. And sometimes being off for a week can throw a lot of people off, and so we'll just wait a couple of seconds here. And with that, if you have not subscribed to the Royal We channel, do so down below. The links are down below. And I want to thank you all for your support and your encouragement of repelling last weekend. That was great. It's good to be able to overcome fears in life and to do so in a way that is building for yourself to build yourself up, right? Life is about challenges and overcoming those challenges, and so that was great to be able to do that. And I praise God for that opportunity, and I praise God for you. And looks like some people are signing on here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, how holy is your name. Your kingdom will come, and your will shall be done, here on this earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who have sinned against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from the evil that's in this world. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And everybody says, Amen. It's so important that we do, in fact, need to learn how to forgive others as we have also been forgiven. And I think it's important that we also need to understand that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same things, and it's okay for us to forgive people without reconciling, because as we know, there's no reconciliation with the world, and I believe that this would be an important video to talk about. How can we reconcile with the world when worldliness is not something we're supposed to even be a part of? And oftentimes, when we deal with narcissistic individuals, people who are in evil, lifestyles, people who are living for the world, living for themselves, we look at forgiveness as having to have something to do with them, and it doesn't. It has everything to do with us. Forgiveness has everything to do with our ability to walk away, and forgiveness has everything to do with our ability to turn our back to that situation, to reface our purpose in life, and to not go back. That is true forgiveness. Going back to argue, right? Forgiveness means we're not going to do back to the world what it did to us. We're not going to do back to narcissists what they did to us. That would be going back into the world. So forgiveness is turning and going away, and we need to understand that reconciliation does not take place. Reconciliation, how can you be reconciled to the world ever? How can you be reconciled to worldliness? How can you be reconciled to a relationship you shouldn't have been a part of, a dynamic that you shouldn't have been in? Now, that's not the message that we have for today. Today, we are going to be continuing on in the life of Joseph. That was just a side note this morning. For whatever it's worth, we're going to be finishing up, or not finishing up. We're still in the story of Joseph. Now, following along, Joseph was the youngest son of his father, Jacob. He was the miracle son between Jacob and Jacob's wife, Rachel. Because for the longest time, Rachel wasn't able to have children. Now, Jacob had all kinds of children. He had lots of children. It was through Jacob's children that the 12 tribes of Israel were formed. And now there was an issue between the other brothers who mostly were Jacob's wife, Leah. Jacob had two wives, the two sisters, Leah and Rachel. And although Jacob's love for Rachel was very strong, the Lord caused Leah's womb to be able to open up and flourish and have most of the children. And so it was Jacob and Leah who had the majority of the children. And so these became Joseph's half brothers, if you will. And Joseph was the son of Jacob and Rachel. As a result, Joseph was favored in a way by the father. Not necessarily a good thing. We need to understand this dynamic. I believe that Joseph loved all of his kids, but there was something about the fact that Joseph was the only son of Rachel. And I believe that there was some dynamic there that we need to pay attention to as to the joy that that brought Joseph, right? Not saying that he didn't love the other children, but there was a certain amount of joy there, okay? And so as a result, the other brothers were very envious, very jealous of Joseph. They conspired against Joseph when Joseph was having dreams. They threw him in a pit. They made up a story to their father Joseph about how their father Jacob about how Joseph was eaten by an animal, and but in reality, Joseph was taken off. He was captured. He was sold into slavery by his brothers and went to Egypt. Egypt was uh, the greatest place of power at that time. It was the place to be, right? If you were into the city life, okay? And while Joseph was in Egypt, he gained favor because of his work ethics, because of his humbleness, and also because of his faith in God. God had elevated him. And one thing we see about Joseph is that he did not bring attention onto himself. And we're going to see even more of that. And this is what made Joseph such a powerful figure. This is what allowed Joseph to be used by God, is because Joseph would often deflect any of the attention on himself and say, it's God who brought me here. It's God who does this. And it's for this very reason that Joseph got himself also in trouble. And this is important because one of Pharaoh's servants, one of the people under Pharaoh, had Joseph as a servant in his house. And this person's wife took a liking to Joseph, an inappropriate liking, and wanted to have a relationship with him and was constantly at him. Joseph, sleep with me. Joseph, sleep with me. She had the hots for him. Joseph said no. And one of the things that we see here is Joseph's acknowledgement of that God put him in that position. Joseph's reason for saying no was this. He says, I serve your husband, and why would I do this sin against God? What Joseph is doing is saying, listen, I'm not here because I'm great, and I'm not here because I've earned this spot. God has put me here. Why would I sin against God and do this unrighteous thing that you're talking about doing? This is an important concept to understand. Joseph had a full understanding that he had really no control of his life outside of trusting and believing and hoping that God had him in a place. And you and I need to understand this, that wherever we are in life, sometimes in our darkest moments, we need to be able to shut ourselves down of what we think our life should look like. And we need to pay attention to the possibility that God is working something in our lives. And I know we don't want to, because things don't look the way we want them to look. I highly doubt life looked the way Joseph wanted it to look. He was no longer at home. He was in a foreign place, a place of debauchery, a place of heathenism. He was in Egypt, for crying out loud, the Las Vegas of the world, and he was a servant there. He had nothing of himself. He had no wealth. He had no power. He knew nobody. All he had was God. All he had is his faith. That's all he had. And yet that was enough to allow him to work hard. He wasn't working for himself. He was working for God. He understood that he had to trust that God could do something miraculous. And God showed Joseph that he would. All right. So no matter what dark place you're in, if we have faith and we have hope that God is going to do something great in that, then we rest in that and we work in that. Now, how many of you have been there? I know I've been there. I moved from California to St. Louis, not really knowing anybody. I've had cousins out here, but I had no job. I had no promise. I had no idea really what we were going to be doing. But the doors opened up as I humbly walked through them. And we're here, and it's a brand new life. And so this is true. And I was born and raised out in California, right? So I left everything behind. All right. So this is true in all of our lives. Now we're going to continue on today because Joseph ran into trouble with the wife of Potiphar. Potiphar was the person under Pharaoh, who Joseph was a servant of. It was Potiphar's wife who had Joseph then thrown back in jail. And it says here that, and we're in Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. It says that when 2 years had passed. Now, 2 years, all right, this is 2 years after Joseph had already been in jail. Now, Joseph had interpreted some dreams for some other people who were in jail, the cupbearer and also master, the master baker. And in the dream that they had, they were very, upset about this dream that they had. Joseph came through and he interpreted their dreams. The chief cupbearer was going to be restored back to his position, while the chief baker was going to be impaled and killed by Pharaoh. And sure enough, as it turns out, this really happened. Both the chief baker and the cupbearer were taken out of jail, and exactly that took place. The cupbearer was restored. The chief baker was killed and impaled by Pharaoh. So Joseph is still in prison at this time. And it's also important to understand that in this dark place of prison, the Lord had continued to bless Joseph even there, because Joseph was the favorite person of the warden. Joseph was put in charge over other prisoners. This is another indication that no matter where you're at in life, you can be in prison and still be blessed, as though you are, as long as you are working, as though you're working for God, as though you have that faith. You have that in your life. This is important for us to understand. And so in chapter 41, it says that 2 years after the chief baker and the cupbearer were let go, and the chief baker was killed, after 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh started having dreams. All right. Now, 2 years is a long time, by the way. How many would say that? One of the biggest issues that we deal with, this is on a side note, one of the biggest issues we deal with coming out of narcissistic abuse, coming out of the lies that were told about us, coming out of the smear campaigns, one of the biggest issues that we deal with is, how long is it going to take to heal? How long must we live under the imprisonment, if you will, of that pain, of that suffering? How long does it take? How long do we have to feel like we're nothing? How long do we have to live in this cell with our face in the dirt? All right. We need to understand that what we're given an image of here with the story of Joseph, like many of you, like myself, did nothing wrong in the situation to deserve being put in jail. He did nothing wrong to deserve his brothers selling him into captivity. He did nothing wrong except live his life in accordance with the righteousness that was inside of him, the ambitions in life that were given to him, the dreams and visions that God had given him naturally, his gifts. This is all he was guilty of. And in a lot of our situations, that's all we're guilty of too. We go into relationships with people with nothing but our ambitions and who we are, and we're punished for it, because narcissistic people, their envy, their jealousy, and their rage, and as a result, we get put in some kind of a prison. Many of you felt like you've been in prison, right? So how long are you there? So one of the things that I'm going to be talking in my videos coming out on the Royal We channel this week is the length of time, understanding the healing process, the length of time, the time in prison, the time of pain and suffering that comes after the abuse, right? The time of darkness that we go through in a cell. We really don't have a full understanding of how long Joseph was in jail total. It says 2 full years after the incident with the cupbearer, the dreams with the cupbearer and the chief baker. But that doesn't account for all the years that Joseph was imprisoned in his life. Later, we're going to find out that Joseph was 30 years old before he was under Pharaoh. He was a young boy when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. So there's at least probably 10-year gap of Joseph living in this prison of a life. All right. So here we go. 2 full years had passed since Joseph interpreted those last dreams. He was standing by the Nile. This is Pharaoh's dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river came up 7 cows, sleek and fat. They grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile. stood beside those on the riverbank, and the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. How many of you have had some scary dreams in your life? Pharaoh's dream was basically this: some good-looking, fat cows. And cows were a big deal in the ancient, I mean, that was their food, right? That's what they used. And so in his dream, beautiful, fattened cows, the type that you would want to barbecue, right? The type that it was wealth to them, it was money. And he saw that and he's like, yeah. Then in his dream, behind those cows came up these ugly, wretched looking, withered, nasty cows. How many of you have had dreams before of things looking like they're decaying and dying? I have. But those cows, that was Pharaoh's dream. Those cows came up behind the fattened cows and they ate the fattened cows. So this is Pharaoh's dream as he's watching this play out in his head. He's watching this wealth, everything that he loves in life, being eaten up by these nasty looking, scrawny, decaying cows. That's a nightmare. That would be nightmarish, right? It'd be like zombie cows coming up and eating fat cows. And Pharaoh woke up. That's the kind of dream, by the way, that really shakes you up. It's the kind of dream that really shakes you up. And it's one that you remember. How many of you have had a dream like that you really remember, you grab onto? I have had similar dreams in my own life like that. I've had dreams, especially when it comes to the decaying of flesh and of things. I've seen these visions in my own dreams and have struggled with understanding the significance of it, what this dream was all about. And I remember them to this day. And I, in my own spiritual journey, have had an understanding of what the Lord now has been trying to tell me. It all plays a part of where we're at and where we're going and the world that we live in. And I understand a lot of this now. But dreams are important, by the way. Dreams are very important to us. And so for those of you who maybe think that you can discount dreams, right? How many of you have had children who have had nightmares? Your first response to them is, oh, it's just a dream. It's just a dream. Let it go. I would say that based on the ancient literature, what the ancient people are trying to tell us is dreams are a little bit more important than that. Dreams are, in fact, a way that we most likely can be downloaded information from a place in our sleep when we are not consciously aware, when we are not actively involved in life. Something is being downloaded from a different power, from a different source outside of ourselves. How do we know this? Well, because it's even mentioned in the ancient literature of the Bible. Joseph was given dreams. Pharaoh was given dreams. The chief baker, the chief cupbearer were given dreams in the ancient literature, and they are all significant. They are all important. I believe that we need to acknowledge and look back and recall some of the dreams that we have had, maybe allow them to resurface, maybe pray on them, maybe ask for an interpretation I'm not talking about going to some, witch doctor or whatever, but an interpretation from within yourself and your own prayer life, maybe even a trusted believer, to try to understand if there's something in that dream for you, if there's something to understand. Let's not always just dismiss every scary dream that we have. And so we see this. We're going to pick up in verse 5 now. We're still in chapter 41. Verse 5, he fell asleep again and had a second dream. So Pharaoh had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. Then after them, 7 others, grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. So once again, we see Pharaoh having the same dream regarding wealth. Healthy grain was sprouting. That simplified wealth. And again, in Egypt, these are things that Pharaoh would concern himself with. How many cows are out there? How much food is available? What's the wealth like? And in that place, the wealth is food and sustenance, right? So to have these dreams is significant for Pharaoh. and probably scary. This is just like the cow dream in that there was a lot of beautiful grain in Pharaoh's dream, sprouting up, wealth and grain as far as the eye can see. And then behind that was withered, rotted, nasty looking grain that came up and ate the good grain. Once again, Joseph woke up. And so, not Joseph, Pharaoh woke up. Pharaoh was perplexed by these dreams. Nobody could interpret them. He called his magicians. He called his wizards at the time, we see in verse 8. He was troubled by these dreams. And it was in verse 9, we see that the chief cupbearer finally said, after 2 years, said, "Today I'm reminded of my shortcomings," verse 9. Verse 10, Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream that same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew person was there with us, that's Joseph. He was the servant of the captain of the guard. He was in a high place, even in prison. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. And so the cupbearer was reminded of Joseph and how he was able to interpret those dreams. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, got himself cleaned up, went before Pharaoh. In verse 15, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Now this right here is one more indication. Verse 16 is another indication of exactly why Joseph is in the position where he's at. Here was Joseph's response to Pharaoh. It wasn't, "I'm your man, Pharaoh. I am your man. You need me in your life." No. This is Joseph's response. Verse 16. "I cannot do it. I can't do it. I cannot interpret your dreams," Joseph replied to Pharaoh. "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." So look at how Joseph is in his life. One of the things that he has learned is if he's answering to God and he's taking himself out of the equation, saying, "I can't help you, but God can." This is a fascinating bit of information that you and I need to grab onto, right? If we start living our lives in this manner, I believe amazing things will happen, because people will stop looking at us and stop competing with us because we are taking ourselves out, saying, "It's not me, it's God." This is what Joseph was doing. You see, one of the issues that I believe we all have sometimes is we like to puff ourselves up in our own pride. I can do this, I can do that. And I don't think we completely understand the nature of the competitiveness that we even create sometimes with that. This is something that I even have to watch myself for. You know, as I look back and when I dealt with the narcissistic abuse, how possibly I walked into the situation, and I'm not doing victim blaming by any means. The way in which narcissistic people have treated me in my life is absolutely horrible. The way narcissistic people have treated you in life is absolutely horrible. But one of the things that I acknowledge is that walking into the situation saying, "I can do this, I can do that, I can, me, in a way helps to create competition, even though I don't look at myself as hurting them, even though I don't look at it as I'm trying to demean or devalue anybody, because I'm not. But what sometimes automatically happens with other human beings while we are on this planet, especially with narcissistic people, is the moment that we start saying, "Yeah, I can do that," then it's going to put other people, especially narcissists, on guard, because they now see, "Oh, this person thinks that they're great." If Joseph, in this situation, if Joseph would have told Pharaoh, "Yeah, I can interpret dreams," immediately Pharaoh would have said, okay, great, interpret my dreams. But then Pharaoh also would have said this subconsciously in the back of his mind, I got to watch this guy because he could be powerful. He could be more powerful than me. And it could start to evoke that jealousy and that envy in Pharaoh. And eventually Pharaoh would lash out and strive to impale Joseph, just like he did the cupbearer. Why? Because narcissism in this world operates a lot on envy. Narcissism in this world operates a lot on jealousy. The narcissism in this world is competitiveness. Do you follow me? Do you follow me? So what I'm trying to get across to you, what I'm gathering from this story right here is Joseph was given the wisdom by God to understand this aspect of being here in this world. One of the things, in order to make it, in order to avoid competitiveness and competition with a narcissistic world and with narcissistic people, oftentimes it is best to leave ourselves out of it, to say, no, all right, I'm not capable. That's right. God is capable. Then we leave the narcissists of this world with only one option. They can fight against God, right? If we present ourselves as the one that can do it, knows how to do it, and is the best, then we present ourselves as the competition to a narcissist in the narcissistic world. But if we take ourselves out of it and point towards God, then let the narcissist figure out how to compete with God. This is what Joseph had the wisdom to understand by the age of 30. All right? This is something that you and I need to understand as well. I have been guilty of this myself. I realize now, as I'm talking with you, while I don't take any accountability or ownership over narcissistic behavior, their rage, their yelling, their screaming, their cussing, their whatever, I do understand that walking into a situation with that much pride, I can do this, I'm this, that alone can help feed into the competition, as opposed to separating myself from any competition. What Joseph is doing here is telling the Pharaoh right off the bat in his wisdom, and I believe this was God helping Joseph through this, but right off the bat, he diffused and he sidestepped any possibility of competition between him and Pharaoh. He basically said right up front, Pharaoh, I cannot interpret your dreams for you. He basically said, I will never compete with you. You are the Pharaoh. Now watch this. It doesn't mean that he agreed with Pharaoh's lifestyle. It doesn't mean that he agreed with the Egyptian lifestyle. By no means. But what he did understand, what God had given Joseph to understand, is that he's still the Pharaoh, and he can cause bodily harm to you because of their lifestyle, because of narcissism in the world. So Joseph said, I can't do this. I'm not going to compete with you. Not now, not ever. But God can do this. And as a result, even the Pharaoh, in the Pharaoh's narcissism, and how many of you understand that it takes a lot of narcissism to probably be the Pharaoh who impaled the cupbearer or the master, not the cupbearer, but the master baker impaled him because of his anger, right? A lot of narcissistic abuse there, a lot of narcissism. But what Joseph did by sidestepping that competition, the possibility of any competition, immediately it put Pharaoh at ease. Immediately, it took Pharaoh's eyes off of Joseph completely, allowed complete trust. And we'll see that later in this chapter, which we will finish up next week, as Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of everything. Pharaoh basically said, well, you're no competition to me. I have nothing to worry about with you. You're in charge of everything. Pharaoh liked that, right? Listen, we're going to wrap it up right there because there's so much that's going on here, and there's a lot of insight into what God is doing in this situation. And and how God is using Joseph. And ultimately, the whole point of this was not of where Joseph is. Ultimately, doesn't even come down to anything great about Egypt, because Egypt eventually was destroyed, right? We're going to find out in later chapters that Moses goes to Egypt to pull people out of there, right? And Egypt gets burned down by God. So in no way, shape, or form is Egypt a place of righteousness. Again, Egypt was the place like a Las Vegas. It's not about that. It's about how God used an individual to infiltrate Egypt, which is what took place, in order to save many people from what was about to take place, a great famine across the land. With that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much for being a part of Royal We Fellowship. Now, for those of you who would like to be a supporting friend, partner of Royal We Fellowship, down in the description box, you can find links to be able to offer your support. It's not required, but rather inspired if you are inspired to do so. Make sure that you are on the Royal We channel, the original Royal We channel throughout the week. I'm going to be uploading a lot of videos this week for you. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you so much for being here. Bless you all. Shabbat shalom. Have a great weekend and be blessed. We'll see you next Saturday morning, next Shabbat, right here on Royal We Fellowship. Have a great week, everybody. Be blessed. Bye.